independence and anti-Westminster rule, everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Let me just start the show by saying it was great to meet so many of you last weekend in Glasgow, dear old Glasgow town, at the Alipper conference and outside of the Alipper conference. It was great to meet you all. Had a great time here. I hope those of you who were there did, and those of you who were watching in had equally as good a time. And the show we put on for you last week was our first unionist guest, and I know a lot of you found that interesting. And hopefully now that other unionists will have seen that, or Greens or supporters of GRRB will say they come to Prism. We will give them a platform. We will treat them with respect. We will question, perhaps, but we will not be anything but welcoming and polite. So, without further ado, there's a lot been happening this week, and it all did kick off last Saturday. But let me get the gang in first before we get started. I'm speaking to you today from Dubai, where I am enjoying seeing my family, my grandchildren in particular. But where have we got? Oh, let's start in North Dakota, where we've got the Coatbridge Cavalier.
Howdy.
Howdy, my friend. How are you?
Aye, good. It's I think it's getting winter here. It's getting right into it. So reminded me of home and the bleak winter.
32 degrees.
I know. I kind of miss the sun. I like the Far East. So I don't know where my next assignment's going to be after this one. So let's just see what happens. Keep promises for climbs further south of here, maybe. Let's see what happens. Who knows?
I don't know. Okay, and over there, down there on the borders, we've got our Dr. Yvonne and Lloyd.
Good evening. You know, just a few weeks ago, it was broad daylight outside, and now it's just, you know, the winter nights are coming in, and but not where you are. So,
well, nice to see you. We've missed you. You weren't here, of course. You weren't there. None of us were there last week. Well, I was, but none of the rest were. Nice to have you back. Nice to see you. And our favourite lawyer up there in Clackmannanshire, our Eva.
Hello, Roddy.
Eva, my friend, how are you?
I suppose it's like everybody else, back to the dreich weather and green with envy looking at you sitting there in the sunshine when I've just made a big pot of soup and the coal fire's roaring up the chimney. So the nights have drawn in.
Back to old clays and porridge. And over there in Old Reekie, it's our favourite weatherman. It's Mr. Quinnan.
How are you doing, Roddy?
Always better for seeing you, my friend.
Thank you.
So, gang, here we are again. It's another week, and it's been a very, very, very eventful week. And we always like to try and prioritise, and we have to start. So, with the big defection, the new member, the first MSP for Alipper, Ash Reagan. Did it come as a surprise to you?
No, it is the natural home, as we said previously with Lisa Cameron. For anyone who truly has independence in their heart and as their focus, as their prime directive, if you will, then the answer is to leave the infiltrated and incompetent SNP and move towards Alipper. And it's no accident that SNP we were at our best when Alex was in charge, and as soon as Nicola and our cabal were handed the reins, probably the biggest mistake Alex has made, and he holds his hand up when he makes mistakes, as we all do. He tends not to make very many, right enough, but that turned out to be one of them. We didn't see that coming, none of us did. And we're now in a situation where Ash had nowhere else to go, to be honest. The SNP had turned on her. We see what they do. The machinations within SNP management. There's ways of pushing you out, and she was certainly getting further and further away from any other ministerial position or progress. And it's something I know that Lloyd has said. You've really got to keep fighting. And the best way to fight for Ash here is to join a party that's going somewhere, that's not in decline, and that does fight for what she believes in, which is independence. So, no, she's right to do so. And like most endeavours, of course, timing is key. So when will there be more is the question. I mean, we've been asking that for a long time. And I would say that mistiming is probably more appropriate for most folk. They see an opportunity, and because of the gravy train and because of their comfortable position, they tend not to want to give it up too readily. So I would say only when they've lost. See, when the SNP lose big, I think that's when we'll see a whole swathe of folk jumping ship. I think that's just human nature. But good on you, Ash. Fair play to you. Good move.
Yeah. And Yvonne, of course, unfortunately, due to circumstances out with your control, you were unable to be there last week. But when you were watching from home, did you get a surprise? Did you get a buzz?
Oh, apologies anyway to everybody that I missed at this fantastic weekend. I just about heard the cheers in the borders. It was like, what the hell? It was just fantastic. You likened it to a derby game with Sunderland and Newcastle trouncing them. I tell you what, it was even better than seeing Newcastle trounce Man U the other night. It was just absolutely tremendous. We've got another strong woman on board. And, like Phil, well, he says he wasn't surprised. I was surprised. I was gobsmacked. But when you think about it logically, yes, the Alapa is the natural home for somebody like Ash. And I would have also thought that it was the natural home for Joanna Cherry, but Joanna, she put out a tweet today, which I was very disappointed at. And that was that the only way to get independence is through the SNP. And I don't know whether it's a mantra that she has to say to keep in the SNP, or whether she's had to say it so often that she now actually believes it. But come on, you're the smartest woman in the SNP. And to tell people...
That's not a high hurdle these days.
Well, I was just really disappointed to see Joanna put out this tweet saying, stay with the SNP if you want independence, especially after the party have said we're no longer interested in independence. And that barking mad bint Lorna Slater, who said independence isn't a red line. It's like, what?
Trust me, that's a topic all on its own. We're coming to that one.
Right.
But there's an appropriate time now you mention it. Techie, can you stick up the figures from... There was a by-election yesterday, folks, down in Kintyre. And it was an independent, and we'll stay with the independent, but the big thing to see here is the SNP vote collapsed again, down almost half, from 33% down to 17%. A massive collapse of their vote. So, Lloyd, it kind of... it seems it's a good time for Ash to make a move, and you know Ash better than anyone in this programme. She was in your constituency. You were, I believe, her election agent the first time she was elected, and the convener of her branch. Were you at all surprised to see that she'd made the move over to Alapa?
I was and I wasn't. Given what I know about the way she's been treated for the past 2 to 3 years, where she's shunned entirely by not only the members of the parliamentary group, but the jumped up children that they have for staff, have made her life very, very difficult. It's not an easy place to work in anyway, the Parliament. And if you're constantly feeling under the pressure of people giving you daggers and avoiding talking to you, not being allowed to be seen by people, I admire the fact that she put up with it for so long, because she even had that trouble when she was a minister. Now, what I think here is it's a tremendous opportunity for getting the independence message back on track. The opportunity she has now as the sole Alpa member of our parliament allows her, I'm not sure exactly what the rules are now, but she will get a question at First Minister's questions. I think it will be every 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not certain about that. That gives her a great opportunity to reintroduce the concepts behind why we want independence. I think the other thing it does too is it allows her to introduce legislation. Now, everyone's saying everyone should leave the SNP, and I would just caution on that, because to get legislation tabled in the Parliament, be it as a party or as a private member, you need to have the support of at least 3 of the other parties. Now, the smart thing for anyone thinking of jumping ship is don't do it now, because Ash will require certain signatures on certain pieces of paper to progress the case through the structures of the Parliament. The other thing that it offers her a great opportunity to do is to find specific issues that she can address using the expertise of some of the people, for instance, like Eva and Yvonne and many others in ALPA, to give them that platform within Parliament to meet with third sector organisations, to meet with community organisations, to propose ALPA legislation in the Scottish Parliament, based on some of the ideas that Yvonne, Eva, Jackie Bister and Leanne Tervatt have come up with. Now, I hope that's what they do, because the opportunity here, if you play within the rules and maximise the opportunities without going down the straight line road of seeking out material to attack the SNP. That would not be the smart move at this stage. What is needed is a positive campaign based on the issues that touch the people of the country right at this very moment. And most importantly of all, the one we all know is the answer to all of these issues is the independence issue. And what I would like her to see, I would like to see her do, is table a form of Neil Hanvey's bill from Westminster in the Scottish Parliament. I also think there are certain procedural issues in terms of elections, eligibility for elections, that she also could introduce possible legislation on, which would be very, very positive leading into the next Scottish Parliament election, if you have the Scotland United concept very firmly in your mind. I could go on about this for a while, but the opportunities are great. And I'm sure, Alex is a tactician. I'm sure he's gone through and has a plan. But the key thing is, it mustn't all focus on her. She is the leader of the ALBA party at the Parliament at this present time, and must use that platform to bring forward the multiple talents that are available in the ALBA party.
Well, it's absolutely correct. Spot on. Eva, you and I were there. It was, as Yvonne described, or I described to Yvonne, like the roar that went up, the joy of, I don't know, was it a sinner repented or whatever, but it was a tremendous feeling. The atmosphere was electric. But what I did notice after was that a lot of the SNP members seemed to be more upset about Ash going to another independence party than they were about Liz Cameron going to the Conservative and Unionist Party. It really is quite a sad thing.
It's sad, but unfortunately not unexpected. I think it was the leader who made reference to Ash's departure being no great loss. What a very childish, stupid thing to say. Ash is a freedom fighter. She's an independentista. She's a woman of principle, and she's a realist. And it's for those reasons that the roar and the cheers went up last week at our conference, because we knew then what we have known since ALBA was launched, that to get independence, we need to have a united campaign. And what we don't need is what must have truly scunnered Ash and others of her ilk at the recent SNP conference. And what they said was, they're looking for a mandate to be able to persuade Westminster to give us another referendum. We've seen the last of talk of Scottish independence referenda. What we need to be doing is restoring competent government, which we will do when Ash has the opportunity to promote ALBA policies and ALBA proposals within Holyrood. So those who have criticised her for her departure need to look inside their own souls and ask themselves whether they continue to fulfil the principles on which they were elected, or whether Scottish independence and the furtherance of all Scottish interests have somehow become secondary to their personal priorities, which seem at times to be simply maintaining their own position.
Absolutely. Just techie. We've got a quote here from we're talking there about the the result there in Kintyre. We've also got put the poll that came out. Can you put up Mr. Wishart's comments on the percentage of people who are supporting independence but not supporting the SNP and how he's longing to get them back? There you go. Only 53% of those who said they would vote yes in a second independence referendum said they would vote for the SNP. Mr. Wishart goes on, he knows that before it was 80%, and they've got to find a way to get them back. We know the way Mr. Wishart wants them back, Phil, is to block any independent supporter that suggests we go for independence. But when is someone, Mr. Wishart or Mr. Eustace, or someone within the SNP going to say, we need to unite the movement, whether it's a Scotland United, whether it's a loose alliance, whether it's just a general agreement? When is someone going to wise up within the SNP to say, we've got the numbers, but we need to unite them?
Well, the people who know this, and many people within the party do know this, including Lloyd, are not the people in power. And because of the dictatorial methods and management style, it's a small cabal. It continues to do what it's instructed to do. And this latest polling, for the Labour Lib Dem job win in 2026 is a good job for the British establishment and the idiots currently running SNP. How to blow a winning hand, indeed. Replace a capable, competent government under Alex Salmond with a troop of incompetents seeking their 15 minutes of fame and driven by whatever gets them there, or flawed woke philosophy or ideology. I mean, I noted the Herald and Kathleen Nutt on 1st of November pointed this out, what you just quoted, as everybody's reporting, extending their lead over the SNP. Who'd have thought that? And in the general election, voting intentions as well, according to Major Opinion Survey. The latest scoop, it's you're thinking 6 points up from the SNP to increase your lead is staggering. It's appalling. And so I think she quoted was the researcher said it was due to the weakening connection between support for Scottish independence and support for the SNP. Exactly what we've been saying. The difference between the numbers remain strong for Scottish independence, but more and more people are cottoning on to what we cottoned on to a while ago, and Wings caught on to first, or one of the first that went public on it that I was aware of, the fact that we were being betrayed, and we have been, and we are being, and that is a sad state of affairs. So how do we go from what Lloyd said earlier? When do you leave to get things done? I would disagree slightly with Lloyd on that one, with what Ash was toying with, because yes, the Scottish government are in power, but they're just an arm of the British government. What powers do you really have? Of the 35 fiscal and monetary levers you require to operate and function and make an economy work, they've got precious little. It's gamesmanship, it's one-upmanship, it's virtue signalling, and it is of limited use. We've proven we can do it under Alex Salmond, and we have proven that we can be undermined and incompetent under Nicola. God, we didn't need that. We really didn't need that. She has damaged, and she carries a lot of the blame, and so do these incompetent fools that remain part of her cabal, and they remain under the control of those who would keep us on their knees. And that bit, the bad news, the study found that just 55% of respondents who voted SNP in the last general election, 29, indicated they would vote for the party again. That is telling indeed.
Yeah, and Yvonne, you would think it would send alarm bells off in Jackson's entry. And they're talking about a lib lab back to a lib lab government at Holyrood. But the other option, of course, and it was mentioned, you touched on it, and I'll now give you the opportunity to go for it again, which is that the other opportunity is to go with the Greens and Labour. And when your favourite politician, Lorna Slater, was interviewed, she did turn around and say, well, we're independents, it's not a red line for us. We don't really care much about it. Now, when people like myself were warning people before the last Holyrood election. These people aren't really committed to independence. We were poo-pooed and we were told we were wrong and we were bad and we were to wish for Indy. They just proved it. They can't be trusted. They can't bring any good legislation in. They don't know what a man is. They don't know what a woman is. They don't know them from their elbow. Surely it's a wake-up call to those who voted for the Greens their second vote, thinking they were voting for an independence party.
Well, the Butte House Agreement, it has to be incinerated. You know, bonfire night is coming up on November the 5th. Do it then. Just tear it up and make a bonfire. I was going to say and put Lorna Slater on it as well, but I don't want to be seen as but Lorna Slater, you know, she's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't she? I mean, where would Prism be without Lorna Slater? You know, she just keeps delivering line after line after line. Humza Yousaf is saying they're worth their weight in gold. And then she goes and punches a hole in his bows and says, well, it's independence isn't a red line. And, you know, this after Ash Reagan's sensational defection. And she goes and says something like that. She's absolutely balmy. And, you know, the good news is Humza Yousaf's in-laws are now out of Gaza, so at least he doesn't have that on his mind anymore. And I would say to him, focus now on getting rid of the Greens. You know, Alex Salmond gave him a piece of free advice, must have been months ago now. And he said, get rid of the Greens. They're going to bring you down. And not a truer word has been spoken. And they turn round. And of course, you know, they're all being counselled and they're in a state of shock because Ash has left them. And there is this ridiculous rumour going round that they're saying that they'll have to be safeguarded because they'll have to share a corridor with her. You know, these are the people that are talking about sharing toilets with men and women, and yet they're too afraid to share a corridor with Ash Reagan. They're absolutely bonkers. Let's get rid of them. In fact, don't just put an effigy of Lorna Slater on the bonfire. Put the whole bloody lot on the bonfire. They're just bonkers. And they're not good for Scotland. They've blown taxpayers' money. They've spaffed so much up the wall with their crazy ideas. And do us all a favour. Get lost, go away. Join another group.
Lloyd, I don't think you were ever a great fan of the Butte House Agreement, but surely now Humza must, after that, say, calling Patrick Harvey and say, sorry, Patrick, it's over. Surely.
At least, Roddy, what has to happen is Lorna Slater has lost £9 million of the £10 million allocated to the Scottish Investment Bank. Now, at best, she has to be removed from the cabinet and removed from the job at the ministry. Now, whether that means breaking the Butte House Agreement, which I think they should do as well, but at a bare minimum, you have to sack an incompetent minister. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. And if you don't, this vaunted strategy of we will give confidence to the business community, we want to bring the business community with us on the road to independence. Well, I'm telling you, what you've just done is you've just blown up the bridge that they would walk across to help us to get to independence. And every day that goes by where Lorna Slater in particular, but I think you'll find Harvey's doing stuff that's a bit stupid as well. Every day that goes by undermines the people's confidence in the ability of the government. Now, for some strange reason, I decided to spend a few hours this week watching the antics at Holyrood, and it's deeply depressing, because you get the impression of a siege mentality, a projection from some, particularly ministers, of they don't want to be questioned about anything. Everything is a criticism. They're bunkered down in a strange kind of paranoia, which means they don't treat the politicians of other parties with any, how to describe it, any care whatsoever. It's, you know, you're the evil Tories, you're the idiot Liberal Democrats, Labour, your days are over. You can't do that all the time if you want to progress legislation. More and more, I see a failure, not to apologise, that's a dangerous thing to do in politics, but you have to admit when things have gone slightly wrong and you need to get them fixed. But you have to take the actions other than make the statements. And the action required is the removal of Lorna Slater from her ministerial position at minimum. And for me, best case scenario, give yourself the freedom to attack the Greens for being a non-independent supporting party. Get rid of them. You don't need them.
Eva, you're a lawyer. You look at both sides of every argument to come to a judgment. Putting it on you. What's the positive for people, apart from keeping the Greens so they have a majority? What is the positive for Humza to keep this Butte House agreement going apart from that?
What it means is he continues to lead a government that is not competent. And that in turn means that people will be less inclined to vote for independence. Because the point of Alex Salmond running a government that was competent, that had seriousness of intent, was to encourage the people of Scotland to believe in themselves and to believe that we as a nation are perfectly capable of running our own affairs in a fashion which succeeds. And that is not what we've seen in the last few years. And it's very painful for all of us here who are independent supporters to have to admit that. But what went wrong is not that the people of Scotland are not capable of running their own affairs, it's that we've got the wrong people in the lead at the moment. We need to get back to the nuts and bolts of real politics in Scotland. And at the ALBA conference, and to a far lesser extent at the SNP conference, you heard the words independence and self-determination constantly. I mean, I would imagine that practically every resolution on the ALBA agenda contained the words independence and self-determination, because whatever it was that we have ambitions to do, we know with devolution can only be a sticking plaster. And in some respects, it's a sticking plaster when the leg's been hacked off and the patient is hemorrhaging to an, absolutely awful death. That's the position in respect of many of our services, and it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, one of the bugbears for me, as you know, Roddy, is poverty. Poverty, unnecessary poverty, grinding poverty, generational poverty, deep poverty in a land of plenty. So one of our motions was entitled Poverty Kills, Independence is a Lifesaver. It was moved by Alan Petrie and in a harrowing fashion seconded by Leanne Terbett. But every word they spoke was true. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation report 2 weeks ago established that there have been, in the course of the last year in the whole of the UK, almost 4 million people living in destitution. Scotland's figures were narrowly better. We've probably only had something like 250,000 to 300,000 in Scotland living in destitution. How horrific and unnecessary is that? Destitution meaning that you have not the ability to feed or clothe or heat yourself. This is not the country that we should be living in. And part of the reason why we are living in a country like this is because those who were elected to deliver independence signally failed in doing so. They have neither the people, nor the plan, nor the power, nor the process to get it done. And yet the country, the independence movement as a whole, does have the people and the power and the plans and the determination to see it through. Ash Regan is one of those. And if she can achieve the almost unachievable promise that has been made repeatedly by SNP leaders as well as by our own party, it will be to see an independence convention set up without delay. And that independence convention should take charge of the independence campaign for next year's general election. And it should say to everybody stand on an independence ticket, one candidate for independence in each constituency, and we will have a majority of votes and seats for independence. And then what we will do is negotiate independence. No more mandates for referenda. We'll negotiate the terms of the independence settlement. That is what Ash's move to the Alba Party can be the precursor of, provided that those who remain within the SNP, who are as keen on independence as Ash is, get the shoulder behind the wheel and, quite frankly, deliver a foot up the backside to Hamza Yusuf and those around him who have become stultified and are wallowing in a quagmire of their own making.
Absolutely. So one of the things when people like myself were saying on with independence during 2021 years, 2021, 22, we said, listen, but Nicola's so busy and she's been so brilliant with COVID, fantastic with COVID. Now here we are with this inquiry, and suddenly she's been so great. WhatsApp messages, just like the redaction at the inquiry over the Alex Salmon case, redacted, get rid of. They're been so competent, so great. They're hiding all the evidence because she's too shy to take the credit for the greatness of her government and how she handled COVID. And we're getting the same stuff as, well, I have done nothing wrong. Well, then, when someone says that, and then you turn around and say, well, I've deleted all the messages. Well, I don't know if I have. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't recall. It doesn't actually show much competence looking at COVID, does it?
No, it doesn't. It actually is starting to get to the point, the truth of this scheme. And just a final comment on the Lorna Slater issue. We see the mad schemes that the Greens have been able to put in place, including, as Lloyd pointed out, losing all the money under the SNP coalition. I believe this is deliberate undermining of the Scottish Government. A strong party will not allow the tail to wag the dog, as we've seen in Scotland. I watched the Tories manage the Lib Dems on a very tight leash under Cameron in 2015, and it was particularly focused on energy and DEC, Department of Energy and Climate Change, because it's a pet subject of mine. As you know, I've been involved in oil and gas development all around the world, and I was I was the contracts lead for a carbon capture and storage project, which very, very promising. And I watched the Tories deconstruct that initiative that was one of the biggest drives for the Lib Dem coalition. They just did exactly what they wanted. So a strong, coordinated, organised, ruthless party like the Tories can do it. Alex could do it with the SNP. We were tight. We were very, very good. Nicola, for me, it's different with the SNP and Greens with Nicola. I see the Greens as an excuse to put in place policies that avoid independence and focus on issues that are clearly unpopular, as we're seeing with the polls, with the Scottish public, like self-ID, and allow the SNP an excuse to not perform, while serving the establishment's wishes to break up the independence movement from within, and they've done this using the usual modus operandi. On the WhatsApp missing COVID messages, it's another symptom of the disease of incompetence. Fred the Shred, remember that? Well, the Scottish Government obviously embroiled in this WhatsApp message saga during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, James Dawson, KC, counsel to the UK COVID-19 inquiry, said the Scottish Government failed to hand over WhatsApp messages, despite previous assurances that they would cooperate fully with both the UK and Scottish inquiries. Now, there's been suggestions that they were deleted or, I've got auto-delete on. Well, government policy states that ministers and civil servants should, and I quote, routinely delete WhatsApp messages on an at least monthly basis, but only after any important decisions made, and these chats have been officially logged in the government record management system. So the answer to does it automatically turn on? No, you have to physically turn this function on, and the function's called disappearing messages, and users can decide to turn it on or off for the WhatsApp chats, or select specific chats only. Anyone in a chat can turn this function on, but if it's a group chat with multiple people in it, the group admin can change the settings, so only they have the power to do this. So limp excuse, guys. Nicola, you're lying again. You were quick to criticise Fred the Shred and now cannot avoid criticism for your action.
Investigative journalist, I suppose, would be the best way to describe you. Now, if you were investigating this and you heard that all these messages had been deleted, would it get your investigative hackles up? You're muted. You're muted, Yvonne. You're muted. I wish I had a pound for every time I've said that.
Absolutely. Yes, I would. I would get my finest investigative tools out and start digging. And we know through Gary Glitter, nothing is lost forever. So, you know, she will be found out. And she actually gave an undertaking to Channel 4. One of their journalists was astute enough to ask her about the WhatsApps, and she said nothing will be deleted. So, you know, she lies and lies and lies. And then somebody apparently had asked her about the WhatsApp groups that she was running during the Alex Salmond trial saga. And she said, oh, I don't know who any of those women are. And it's like, come on, Nicola, you're lying. Of course you know who they are. We all know who they are. They are the alphabeties. It's all right. I can see Roddy thinking, oh, my God, she's going to name them. We all know who you are, you awful women, mean girls. And, you know, this, if you're going to say something, don't put it on WhatsApp.
You should remember that for your own advice, shall I say? Dr. Ridley. Lloyd, it just doesn't add up, does it? It's just unbelievable. Unless there's been collusion with their fellow Brits down in London, that they were all going to just start deleting stuff.
I just think it's an example of you know, if you create a circumstance where there is one figurehead, one individual who can say or do no wrong as far as everyone who works for her in the party, everyone that works for her in the parliament, then you get a group blindness. And we talk about group think, but a second element of group think is group blindness. It also, the longer it goes on, the more people are invested in, and this is where the cult-like behaviour comes in, the more people are invested in that individual, the more they're in, the less likely they are to effectively admit that they were wrong. It will be, you know, it's the grief process, and a lot of them have got to go through it. What frightens me most about this, though, is that the general attitude of the rest of the ministers, while looking absolutely panic-stricken and in total and complete fear, is they just keep trolling it or rolling out the same old mantra that they're helping. I mean, Alan Smith's performance on debate night on BBC Scotland the other night was frankly chilling, and shows you how utterly and completely divorced that central small group in the SNP are, divorced entirely from the realities of day-to-day life. Now, this has happened because one person was in charge. There was one way of doing things. You mustn't rock the boat. Now, if that happens for 8 years, you've got to the point where the SNP is now, where no one has any political nous. They can't see what's happening to them. They think that just to reject and stonewall the whole thing, pardon the pun, is going to get them through it. When in actual fact, and this again shows how much they're divorced from the ordinary people of the country, ordinary folks say, you're a liar. Immediately you say things like, we will hand over everything that we currently retain. Actually, what does that mean? That means you'll get everything that we've not deleted. You know, but they think they're being clever with this kind of semantics. And the semantics will be torn apart by the KCs. You know, this is an absolute lose-lose situation for everybody. And it's the time when you have to stop crying wolf and put your hand up and say, we made a mess. Another opportunity for Hamza Yousaf to actually make himself his own man, make himself the leader of the party. Unfortunately, I don't think he's got it in him. I really don't think he's got it in him. I think the cruelest thing that happened this week to those on what I would term the other side of the argument from me was the announcement from Kate Forbes that she's got everything. Now, watch the space. Someone's on manoeuvres. Because if she's got everything that everybody else deleted. You know, that's the obvious. And I don't think it's any coincidence that her week in Liverpool with the British-American partnership, that her first pronouncement after she returned from the Mersey was, no, I've got all the messages. And I think that strikes fear. Now, as you all know, I know a lot of these people, and I've known them for a very long time. And I can tell when they are in fear. And I've been watching a former leader of the party in fear, and another former leader of the party in fear, a deputy leader of the party in total and complete fear, and it's going through the ranks. The only ones you don't see the fear from are the ones who were over-promoted during the 8 years, because what they think is, they think they're untouchable because the one that promoted them is untouchable in their minds.
Yeah, even back to evidence, I mean, I know as a lawyer, if evidence like this was suddenly gone missing, the courts would not be happy. But someone I saw on social media said something quite good. We had the Chilcot inquiry, cost millions and millions and millions of pounds, and nothing happened, nothing came of it. And they're saying this COVID inquiry will just be the exact same. With the one about I've forgotten the name of the building. God, that's terrible. That went burnt down in London. The skyscraper, with all the people in it. There was an inquiry into that, and some minor firing official got into trouble for it. But the likelihood is even no one's going to be held to account for this, are they?
I beg to differ, Roddy, because I think that there are so many people so very badly bereaved and hurt and traduced over the course of the COVID pandemic, especially over the lockdowns and the very poor management and poor behaviour that we saw from many in Westminster and some in Scotland. People have long memories when they've been bereaved or when they've been denied, the ability to spend time with their relatives as they were dying, or being denied the ability to have a decent burial. I fall into that category because my family lost my aunt and my dad over that period, and I will not forgive and I will not forget. And there are very many who suffered far more than we did. So I do think that in due course there will be accountability, and I think that the politicians in Scotland know that the public will seek accountability and will not let go. And that is why there is such a stushy at the moment about the WhatsApp messages. I mean, if I can quote from Alan Smith, what he said on debate the other night was, "Nothing is being hidden, absolutely nothing." How does he know? He's an MP in Westminster. I would suggest an awful lot's been hidden. And I would suggest that there were events that happened in his constituency that will come back to haunt him. As you know, his constituency is Stirling, not so far away from me. And I know people that suffered during the pandemic unnecessarily as the result of the actions and the decisions of some of Alan Smith's colleagues. I think if he's watching, he'll know exactly to whom I refer. But he went on to say that the SNP are not running away from transparency. Sorry, what? The SNP are not running away from transparency. The one sure thing about Sturgeon's leadership, which thus far seems to have been copied by Humza's leadership, is that as soon as they say that they're being open and transparent, you know damn fine that the next word that's coming ends with D, redacted. That's where we are. So they've either been deleted or they've been redacted. Those are going to be the words on the tombstone of the Sturgeon and the Yousaf leaderships. That's what people will say. They were corrupted and they hid evidence and they were less than honest, particularly at times when having to give evidence under oath. These matters will all see the light of day. The sooner the better, but one day they will.
Well, I'm not so sure, Eva, because if I think back to, as I say, Chilcot, when so many people died in Iraq, When I think about Lady Moan, we all know that money went missing for PPE. We know that Michael Gove, it's out there in the open, that he gave contracts to pals, as did Hancock. They haven't been arrested. They haven't been charged. They haven't been inquired into by the police. Nothing has happened. We know that what Boris got up to, and it seems that nothing ever happens in the UK. The corruption never gets challenged. It just seems to get swept. They have a big inquiry, a lot of news, but nothing, and nobody ever gets held to account. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right. I really do.
Roddy, could I say something on that? Yeah. You have to ask yourself the basic question in politics: who benefits? Now, nobody in the British government could benefit from full disclosure of Chilcot or the issues around the Iraq war. In this circumstance, I can see huge benefit for the British government, because effectively this is tearing the SNP apart, will tear it apart even further in public, will show, and what I mean by who gains here, what the independence movement and the concept of independence runs the risk of being damaged because of the individual behaviour of certain people. This is not happening by accident. This is not happening by accident, and it's always the same. If an inquiry comes and you don't get the full result of it, it's because it wasn't aimed to cause any problem. This is completely different. This is about ending Boris Johnson's career in terms of the British investigation. And up here, it's about destroying what looked like competence of the Scottish National Party during the COVID inquiry. This is to put the nails in the coffin finally.
Well, I hope you're right. And I hope Boris cops it as well. And Lady Moan and Gove and Hancock. But we shall see. The jury's out in that one. The other thing is, as you alluded to earlier, Phil, is your great love of oil. And as we know, in 2014, it was running out, still running out. And we're getting close to general elections. So no doubt this time next year, the oil will be running out. But the British government this week issued 27 new licenses. How can you issue 27 new licenses when it's running out?
Well, the answer, of course, is as soon as you extract the first drop of oil, the very first drop of oil, be it Mesopotamia or North Africa, wherever it was, oil started to run out. Doesn't mean there's not hundreds of years of reliance on fossil fuels ahead of us, and that remains the case, because people just think, well, I don't need electric cars. They don't realise the application of oil in plastics and paints and pretty much everything, glass, everything you see. The manufacture of cars that are highly reliant on oil, not just as a fuel. So no, it's there's plenty of oil there. When will it run out? The known reserves, and that's a defined term, which you've got to be careful about, because companies, including lots of the companies I worked for, BP, Shell, Statoil, Qatar Petroleum, and a lot of the majors, cannot speculate on what the reserves are, because this affects their price in the market, their share prices. So there's very, very strict regulations about what you can and cannot say. And in terms of the oil that we know about and we can reliably report, and there's certain standards you've got to achieve to be able to release these figures, there's at least 50 years. And when I was down in Westminster, most of the City of London investing houses that were looking into energy were all forecasting 60, 80 years of get your money into oil. It's not going anywhere fast. You know, don't worry about the reliance. It's just too big all over the world. So and there's the undiscovered resources after that in deeper and less benign waters. So from west of Shetland, where I did some of the major work on Quad 204 and Clare Ridge, go further north. In fact, Techie, could you put that map up we talked about earlier? If you could, it helps people show it. When you look at this, is the UKCS, the United Kingdom area or area of ownership, and if you take Scotland out of that, you'll see that we own about 2/3 of that area, that sea area. And out to the west is the Rockall Basin, up north is Orkney and Shetland, and you can see a great deal of the findings. We've only done the benign waters, which is from Felixstowe in the southeast up the east coast into the North Sea, and we're just getting west of Shetland now. because of the limitations in technology. So you can see, like this, that's why we've got 96.5% of oil, 65% of gas, around a third of the land mass, and 2/3 of the sea area for 8.3% of the UK population. As David Cameron famously said, yes, it's easy for a small country like Norway to be rich. Look at the resources they've got. Oops. Well, it's just exactly the same as Scotland almost. You know, then there's all the minerals, the fire ice, methane gas, hydrate. So we will be harvesting from the sea as far as man continues to exist and the technology continues to improve to enable access. And that's key. The main constraints being depth, pressure, rough seas, and technology is taking us there. I specialised in subsea umbilicals, risers and flow lines, so I see in future we avoid surface facilities and it will be undersea gathering systems, and for that we need to invest in the technology, and that's where the British and Scottish government have failed. We did attempt to under salmon with limited resources, but we knew how important it was, because if there's one thing Alex understands, it's energy, and oil and gas in particular, given his background. This is why R&D, or research and development, is so important for a country and for a government to fund it. It pays back many, many times over, and one of the first things I'll do as Energy Minister in an independent Scotland. As we know, and as Eva often states, the too wee, too stupid mantra applies in spite of these massive resources. So I dug out, remember, we all know this. We all this one. What's it? Scotland has only, I've put it up on here. So Scotland has only 8.3% of the UK population, but we do have 32% of the total land area, 61% of the sea area, 90% of all fresh water, 65% are all natural gas, 96.5% of all crude oil, 81% of all untapped coal reserves, 62% of all timber, and the list goes on and on and on. And that, friends, is the base reason why we can't trust the British government, because they will not let this cash cow go.
But that can't be so, Phil, because that man, Sir Ian Wood, who delivers the milk and papers to the oil rigs, said on the BBC, which is the most trusted news outlet in the world, said it was running out in 2019. Yes, I know, my tongue is firmly in my cheek. The clock is clicking on, and there's a lot of topics I want to cover. And one of them, Yvonne, is the court case for Women's Scotland this week. And it was a good and bad result. And I think I'll go next after this to Eva to give us that. And the bad result was that For Women's Scotland lost their case. But there is a silver lining, because it does mean now, and I'm sure Eva will correct me if I'm wrong, the likelihood is now the British government's Section 35 will win. Because it does, in effect, this court outcome affects the Section 35.
It was disappointing, although not entirely unexpected. And there was quite a degree of sympathy as well with the judge who laid out the reasoning behind it. But yeah, it's a blow. But it's just one of many battles. It doesn't mean we've lost the war. It's a battle that's gone. It just means that we'll galvanize ourselves and be stronger next time. We're not going to give up this fight, and we're not going to cave in. You know, we'll just keep on going in a dignified manner and ensure that the women's rights that were hard won over the last 5 decades aren't reduced further. So we're down, but we're not out. And I think Eva would probably agree with that.
Yeah, I'm right in saying, Eva, it was Lady Dorian who heard this case. And if I'm right, I've often used this phrase, and good lawyer friends of mine have said, there is justice in the law, and they're two completely different things. But the law was interpreted correctly, as I see it, because of the legislation that the Scottish Government put through. And so the actual judgment was correct then, obviously, on the law. But am I right in saying that this now makes the case for the British Government with the Section 35 stronger and likely to win?
Right. It's important to remember specifically what the judges decided this week. they decided that if you've got a gender recognition certificate, that has the effect of changing your legal sex for all purposes. But if you don't have a GRC, you've not changed your sex. So that is a victory for, if I refer to Yvonne and me as gender critical women, or those who agree with us, because it means that self-identifying into the opposite sex can have no legal effect. So those who would argue that we should treat people the way that they wish to be treated have now been corrected. If you have a GRC, legally you're the opposite sex to that your biological sex as you were born. But without a GRC, you're not. You can claim that you're reassigning your gender, but that gives you the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, and it enables you not to be discriminated against. What it does not do is allow you to use the single sex rights of the opposite sex. So in that regard, this is a good thing. And it's a good decision. In that regard, it's also a lawful, quite technical decision, although it might be subject to appeal later on. But the other important angle is to look at the Scottish Gender Recognition Reform Bill, which is obviously under challenge by Westminster, and the Scottish Government are challenging that challenge. Because the Scottish courts have said a GRC changes your sex for all purposes, it's now likely that the Scottish Government's challenge to the Section 35 from Westminster will fail, because the Scottish Government changing the rules by which you can get a GRC by removing the medical requirement and by reducing the period of living in the opposite sex from 2 years to, or gender rather, from 2 years to 6 months. Because that changes dramatically the basis on which you can get a GRC, and we'd have that impact on the Equality Act, which works throughout the UK, it's now become more likely, as the result of this week's decision, that Westminster wins and the GRR bill or act will remain on but off the statute books and unlikely to be implemented. And that's not a good thing that Westminster are going to win, but it's a good thing for women and those who worry about safeguarding. Another little point to bear in mind is there's a common misconception that you're not allowed to ask somebody if they've got a GRC. That's not true. You are allowed to ask them if they've got a GRC. So if you're a woman in a hospital ward or a changing room or a toilet and somebody comes in that you think is a trans-identifying male, a trans woman, you're allowed to ask that person whether or not they hold a GRC. What you've not to do is, if you learn that somebody has a GRC through an official capacity such as your employment, you're not allowed to tell other people. It's confidential. But if you as a service user want to know whether another service user has the legal right to be there, you're perfectly within your own rights to ask. And I would suggest that it's entirely appropriate to ask. And people who do have a GRC, that's men who have a GRC saying that they're female, should actually be good enough and kind enough to offer to show the GRC to any women who challenge them. Because refusing to post that, I would suggest, only causes problems, unease and difficulties for women who have valid concerns about these things. So this is a staging post which is taking us in the right direction, albeit there are aspects of it which are painful as well as utterly bizarre.
Indeed. We've covered, I say the clock's beating us. Gentlemen, Les, either of you got anything you'd like to add to that? I'd like to move on to another topic. Lloyd, have you?
No, I think I think Eva explains, the positivity that can be taken from this, and Yvonne's contribution. I mean, I have nothing to say.
Okay. Well, the other thing I realise, we can't let this week go by with the major thing, the whole world out with our independence bubble, if you like, is what's happening in the Middle East, and a few minutes on that. And what I'd like to do is that two members of Parliament, British members of Parliament, who I want to pay tribute to, actually, Paul Bristow, a Conservative MP, was sacked as an aide for asking, writing to the Prime Minister and asking for a ceasefire. And Andrew MacDonald of the Labour Party had the whip withdrawn for daring to ask for a ceasefire, Lloyd. He didn't ask to arm the Palestinians. He didn't ask the Royal Air Force to go and bomb Tel Aviv. He asked for a ceasefire. They asked for a ceasefire, and they were sacked for asking for peace now as a peacenik. I find that objectionable. How about you?
Totally objectionable. What was even more objectionable was that if you actually count up the minutes of the coverage of the destruction of innocent lives in Palestine on the BBC yesterday, it does not amount to the same amount of time that they spent on both news broadcasts on Newsnight last night trying to force Mr. MacDonald to condemn what he said. Kirsty Wark, at her inquisitor, straight out of the big black hoods of the Inquisition, for nearly 15 minutes on the issue of what a member of Parliament said, rather than what's actually happening on the ground in occupied Palestine. To me, it's been utterly and completely shocking. The whole attitude where everybody has to do a mea culpa. There are certain phrases you must use. You must condemn Hamas. You must condemn this. You must condemn that before you're allowed to speak. That's not democracy. This man, particularly Mr. MacDonald, is being absolutely pilloried for what he said, and all he said was, and I defy anybody to argue against this, if the phrase "from the river to the sea" is anti-Semitic or anti-Israeli, then why is there a corridor between Gaza and the West Bank? The river to the sea exists. Gaza is on the sea.
Phil, how did you feel when you heard that these two MPs being effectively sacked for demanding peace or requesting peace and a ceasefire?
Yeah, it shows the strength of lobbyists and shows the extent to which political parties are influenced or controlled by these lobbyists. I say and we say, blessed be the peacemakers, but when we allow our government to torture Julian Assange to death for exposing war crimes, what do we expect? People, that this is to allow evil men to succeed. All good men need to do is sit and do nothing and say nothing, which is why we need to encourage the peacemakers and we need to stand up and be counted. The power of the people cannot be underestimated. And what's at stake here? Well, I know one of the questions you were talking about, are we on the verge of World War III? Well, listen, people, we've got to listen to alternative news streams. It comes down to the same thing as Lloyd described, and as Yvonne is an expert on this subject. She knows exactly how the papers work and how the media works and how lobbyists works and how principled people are compromised and have to set aside some of your principles just to get up to get a job done, to get a career. And we need to listen to alternative news streams and compare and contrast with what you're hearing, folks, on mainstream media. Folk regularly say that they don't trust the papers or the news or the TV, and yet very often spout the same message we get sold in MSMs. If you don't trust the mainstream media, and we shouldn't, what's the alternative? The truth is out there. Remember the Twilight Zone? The problem is it's mixed up with every crackpot theorist, misinformation broker on the planet, and who's got time for sifting through all that? But a couple of places to look: WikiLeaks, Colonel Douglas MacGregor, very good in the proxy war of Russia and Palestine. Scott Ritter, UN weapons inspector, the Grey Zone. Look at Michael Hudson for economics. Look at the Duran, Alex Christoforou and Alexander Mercouris, Jimmy Dore. The list goes on. So check these alternative views out, folks, and make your own mind up. Because it all comes down to one thing: power and money. War is big business, and I'm sure most people don't want World War III. Not everyone. Remember the rapture that we've spoken about before, but people are willing to risk World War III for profit because they're most doubtless convinced that it won't happen. Well, I'm not prepared to take that risk, and we need to do something about it, and that means standing up and speaking the truth and standing up for what you believe in.
Yvonne, Craig Murray an ex-British ambassador, been on this show several times and hopefully will be again. He wrote several weeks ago that our political class and our media class are bought and sold by the Israeli lobby. But the general public are not buying it this time, not just in the United Kingdom, not just in Scotland, not throughout the United Kingdom, throughout Europe. Macron said, to the French, you cannot go out in the streets for, stupid thing to say to the French, you can't go out and protest on behalf of Palestine. They're even protesting in America and in Israel. The Jews, not the Zionists, are protesting against this war, but to sack 2 members of parliament for the crime of asking for a ceasefire. I don't want to live in a society like that, do you? You're on mute again, Yvonne.
Not
Still
at
there.
all. Yeah, not at all. But I will make a prediction. Because of the strength of the Israeli lobby at the moment, I predict that a new party will come on the scene in England very soon. And I think that Sir Keir Starmer is further away from getting the keys to number 10 than he ever has been, for being such a miserable hypocrite. And of course, the Tories as well. They're absolutely despicable. And but this is my prediction, because there is a huge vacuum just between the political class and the ordinary people. Just a few hours ago, Al-Shifa Hospital, which is the largest hospital in Gaza, called the Israeli army and said, we are about to move a convoy of critically injured people to the Rafah border. Then they will go on to have operations overseas. And so we're moving this convoy, and we thought we would let you know as a courtesy. The convoy hadn't even got out of the front of the hospital gates when it was shelled by missiles. And this is an out-and-out war crime. There's no two ways about it. It is a war crime. The UN is absolutely fizzing. And I'm critical of the UN because they're pretty useless. People think that the UN can work miracles. Well, they can't. The UN have lost 70 of their own staff since this war started, at least 70. There are other staff missing. And a lot of civilians were killed in this strike as well, because there's a great big UN flag. And people, refugees who have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide in Gaza, gravitate towards the UN thinking, well, we might be safe here. And hospitals are being bombed, schools are being bombed, babies are being slaughtered, children, women, innocent men. And the attack is so disproportionate. And when wretches like Keir Starmer turn around and say, we can't call for a ceasefire, let's pause. What a miserable, rancid hypocrite he is. And he claims to speak for the working classes. I don't know any working class person who would want to see this war continue. And while that was going on, Blinken, the Secretary of State, was visiting Netanyahu, or his counterpart, and there's usually a dual press conference, which is, to put it bluntly, usually the mutual wanking society. But there wasn't this time. This time there was just Blinken on his own, saying, well, we're hoping for a pause in the ceasefire. He's not going to get it. And people think that it's the tail wagging the dog, or that Washington is in control, or who's in control. Israel holds Washington under political occupation, and that's the truth. Israel, which isn't the size of a South African game park, is America's watchdog in the Middle East. And we are on the edge of World War III. And while all of this was going on, the Hezbollah leader, Nasrallah, was making his speech. And he was actually quite conciliatory, and he was talking 1 minute about all-out war, and then he was pulling back. And a lot of people were waiting to see what Nasrallah was going to say, because America has 2 big armadas in the Eastern Mediterranean at the moment. What are they there for? I think they're there ready to evacuate 700,000 American citizens that are dotted around the region. But I think that if I was an American soldier stationed in Syria, which they are all over the oil pipelines, or an American soldier in Yemen, I would be very worried tonight. I wouldn't sleep tonight, because I think that it's quite obvious this war is going to escalate. And, God help us all. And it's all because of Netanyahu, prime minister of this tiny little state. People imagine that Israel, having the 4th largest or the 4th most powerful army in the world, is a huge country, but it isn't even the size of a South African game park. And it is outrageous that this country is ignoring UN rules and regulations, trampling over the bodies of Palestinians to commit war crime after war crime after war crime. Europe and America and Britain should be doing is bringing in the ambassadors and expelling them. Absolutely. Until Israel learns to respect international law and respect humanity. At the moment, we're watching a genocide. And and depending which channel, I would urge people to watch Al Jazeera English if they want to see the full brutality of what is being done in our name. It's got to stop. There are Scots people out there fighting for this IDF, and I hope when they come home that Police Scotland closely question them, because these recruits are part of
that's not going to happen, Yvonne. It won't happen. You know that. I know that. It's not going to happen. I'm just going to finish because we're running out of time. Just a quick one on you. But I've had a couple of lawyers actually give me a hard time saying I'm pro-Hamas and but we'll let it slide, Roddy, and things like that, because I'm shouting for peace. Just as I'm shouting for peace in Ukraine, I'm shouting for peace in Yemen and everywhere, because I'm against war. What part of that is that you don't understand, folks? I'm not pro anyone. I'm anti-war. Get it through your nuts. But it's a fact, Eva, in law, that collective punishment is a war crime.
Okay.
And if politicians, be them leaders of the opposition, governments, presidents, prime ministers, promote that, are they not an accessory to a war crime? That was my point, and I had 2 lawyers piling on top of me for saying that.
Collective punishment is a war crime. We've seen war crimes conducted live on telly over and over again on so many occasions in the last few decades, but particularly so in the last few years. It's unacceptable, and it's happening because we have leaders who are either venile, or they're corrupt, or they just don't care about humanity. The Alba policy is for an immediate ceasefire and for crimes to be prosecuted, and that's on all sides. We're not picking a side. There is no side. There are no winners. There are no losers, other than everybody who loses their life and everybody who loses a shred of humanity. I spoke last week at our conference about children who were having amputations done without anaesthetic to save their wee lives. How the hell are politicians like that happen? How you can see what happened in Israel and you can see what happened in Gaza and allow it to be perpetuated absolutely beats me. It's wrong, and the leaders of every country in the world who do not speak out and who allow it to continue unabated are morally, if not also legally, culpable.
It is terrible. And I've just been reminded by Yvonne, Police Scotland are trying to stop a march against the war tomorrow, which is it's just wrong. It's wrong. We're meant to be the good guys, and we're meant to live in a democracy. If the people want to go out in the streets and demonstrate against the war, they should be allowed to. By the same token, I would agree, as a Democrat, if people want to go in favour of the war, they should be allowed to demonstrate. I'm a Democrat and I'm a peacenik. Now, more on that. This midweek, ladies and gentlemen, this is this finish for today, but midweek, we have a special guest, and myself, Lloyd, and Yvonne will be taking part in a programme that I think will you will enjoy. It will enlighten, and I look forward to seeing you all midweek. But until I do, may you and yours please take care and stay safe.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.